Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome to my amazing tribe. Today we have another important guest, I believe, and I'm looking forward to all the learnings that I'm hoping to get. Thanks to Anita. Anita, thank you very much for accepting my invitation.
Hello, it's an honor to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Joanna.
So you are joining amazing Joanna's tribe. So you're already belonging to Fantastic People Plus. With that, let's start with introductions, shall we? So, Anita, if you could introduce yourself to the world, what would you say? What are the most important things that we should know about you?
Definitely the fact that I don't like introducing myself. I don't like talking about myself, so that's always hard. I like talking about other people or about work or topics that matter. But let's stick to some facts, what would be relevant for the audience. I'm a Scrum Master and Neurodiversity Advocate, and I'm based in the Netherlands on the border with Germany, literally a few kilometers away from the border. And I have been spreading some information and knowledge about neurodiversity within product teams since last year.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for asking the question.
That's an important question after all.
It is. So I always prefer to let my guests choose what they wanted to say.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Uh, if you don't mind, I would love to add something to your introduction. So, Anita was this year an important person to me because she belongs to the team of organizers for online Scrum Master Summit. Great conference because it is online. So everyone has pretty close distance, right? You just need a device connected to internet. It's free if you want to attend it live. And I have to admit that really interesting people are invited there. Great talks are accepted. So I hope that we will meet next year. For me, I believe it will be the third online Scrum Master Summit. So I'm looking forward to the future.
Awesome. That means you have missed only the first one because it was the third one being organized, and it was loads of fun organizing it. So thank you for being there and giving your talk.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So now the secret was revealed. How do I know Anita, right? So she was extremely helpful and kind person during the conference. Now, today we are not going to talk about the conference, but maybe one day we should. Today I would love to talk about the topic that you are advocating, Anita. So about neurodiversity. Can you explain what does it mean for you?
I like how you added for me because I think there are different descriptions for it and how I always explain it, especially to people who work with Agile. You have an Agile umbrella, and under the umbrella, you have Scrum, Kanban, Extreme Programming, and so on. Neurodiversity is an umbrella which describes different ways how our human brains work. And under neurodiversity umbrella, you can have different conditions like autism, ADHD, dyspraxia, dyslexia, dyscalculia. Don't ask me how to pronounce that in English. High sensitivity, and so on and so on. And that all falls under the umbrella. So most of the people in the world, around 80%, are neurotypicals, which means that their brain work in a standard way, and our society and our world is built according to their needs and what's important for them. And around 20% of the population are neurodivergent, so they fall under the umbrella, which means that their brain work in a different way. How
Mhm.
exactly it works, it depends on the condition or conditions you have, but you are a minority in a world which is not built for you. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a very short description of what's neurodiversity.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Um, so it's interesting that this percentage is pretty similar to what we learn about, for instance, Pareto rule, right? Or we have those different
Yeah.
research, like around 80% of features are not used. And once again, we can we can observe here, the majority, okay, belongs here, but still 20%, it's not a small group, right?
And it could be even bigger because that's only amount of people who have officially diagnosed or who are
Mm-hmm.
aware that their brain work different. There might be loads of people who still struggle and they don't really know why they're struggling because so that's a topic we will discuss shortly. But in some countries, it's still much more stigma and taboos than in other countries. So I can imagine that the percentage will be just growing in the next years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And as you are Scrum Master, expert in Scrum and Agile field, why do you believe this topic is important in the context of Scrum teams?
I have my own stereotypes. We all do, and ideas. And I think that in technology world, amount of people who are neurodivergent is higher than average, based
Mm-hmm.
on the experience with all the amazing people I have worked with. I currently work in a Scrum team where we have people with autism, dyslexia, um, and I'm thinking we also have in my company people with ADHD, and there might be some more diagnoses I'm not aware, and that's just one company. And the more I talk about this topic with other Scrum Masters and Agilists, the more they have colleagues who are neurodivergent. So obviously, you will see them everywhere because it's a big percentage, but I think in the product teams it's especially high, and it's still one of the topics so little spoken about. While I think we should start talking about it more, and Scrum Masters are the best people to start breaking the stigma, educating themselves, and then they can better support their colleagues.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, what I understood is that lack of knowledge, lack of understanding of different needs, different perception of the world, because of neurodiversity. So, if we just don't pay attention to that, if we like close our eyes, we may lose some opportunities for maybe better communication, better collaboration. How do you see that topic?
I think we can definitely lose opportunities, as you say, and we can also simply not give people chance to do their best work.
Uh-huh.
Think of a simple example. You are facilitating a daily stand up, and you have a colleague who is regularly late. We all know we have all been in that situation. As a junior Scrum Master without a lot of experience, it might be automatic for you to have a talk with that person and just say they need to be in time and they should pay more attention to their habits, and those 2 minutes are important and people are waiting. You know the drill. But what's actually is more important is figuring out why is that person late and what are the reasons behind. And it's not even anything to do with neurodiversity because maybe they need to drop their kid at the school and the school is just opening at a certain time. But it could be that they are neurodivergent and are just not aware of the time. For example, for people with ADHD, it's really hard to be on time. And those 2 minutes, let's be honest, does it really matter often? Quite often or not, you just think, oh, it's those couple of minutes, I can be late, nothing will change. Or they just forget to look at the clock when they leave. So they're not being bad on purpose. They're not wanting you to wait. It's just they have a different perception of time. And the more you understand different symptoms, and the more you understand that it's something people can change only until a certain way, the better you can be equipped of, I don't know, changing the daily meeting time, coming up with different team agreements. What do you do when people are late? Introducing competing elements. If you're late, you bring cookies, whatever would work for your team. But you will come from a place from, I want to understand why it's happening from you, and not, those are my rules and you should follow them because we have always done it that way.
I remember that we had years back with my team conversation that, okay, when someone is late, he or she had to buy donuts, and
Yeah, we had the same.
after a few weeks, we decided we don't want that habit.
Too many donuts, huh?
Too many donuts, too many donuts. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I had a member years ago who needed to bring cupcakes, and I think we had cupcakes from that person twice a week, and that was not really motivating for him to be on time. The cupcakes were really delicious, but it doesn't always work that way.
Yeah, but as you are saying, we have to find a way, and first understand why, this underlying why certain things are happening, before we just say, hey, 9 a.m., you are here on time. If not, there will be a punishment, right?
Or think of people who have trouble working in open offices, which is very popular in the tech world. Me and you are remote, not relevant for us during this conversation, but most of the tech offices I have seen are open plan. Again, neurodivergents have bigger issues with sensory overload, but even for neurotypicals, it can be troubling. And not everybody is comfortable enough to advocate for themselves and say, I don't want to work in a place which you have assigned to me. Can I please move to that one corner where there is a free table? I have been doing it and I have managed to find tables which work for me, but I know it's a hard discussion to have with your team. So, as a Scrum Master, if you know what are people preferences, you can better um, take care of your team. And that's talking only about the things they struggle. There are also a lot of positive things and strengths where neurodivergents are better, and it's important to realize them as well. For example, we all know the stereotypes that people with autism are very good with when it comes to eye on detail. It's a stereotype, but it's often true. So if you can use it and ask people who have such an eye for detail to look at the things before they go to production for the last time, for example, you will just be benefiting instead of it being done by somebody who is maybe just mediocre in it. So the more you understand, the better you can figure out how does that work and what does it mean for your team.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for that complete picture, because on one hand, we have certain needs that we should take into account, pay attention to. But on the other, there are some talents, powerful talents that can contribute to the success of our product.
Yeah, exactly. And yesterday, I read on LinkedIn a message from somebody who has dyscalculia, cal- the condition which makes it hard to count. And one of the things you people know is, okay, you're bad with numbers, but what does it really mean? And that person was sharing their suggestions how to better write a time format in a way that it's easier for them to remember what time is your appointment. And that was only a suggestion from that one person, but it made me think how much it would help to everybody else who is very fast reader, doesn't pay attention to to noticing all the small details, maybe gets confused with dates in general, and so on. So if you help neurodivergence, you often help a lot of other colleagues without knowing that as well. And obviously, it shouldn't be only on neurodivergence to advocate for ourselves and to figure out what works, but it's important to have those conversations and try to improve the world so it becomes easier for everybody.
Hmm. I love that example very much. So let's switch a little bit the topic. We actually started a little bit that conversation. So, how neurodiversity is perceived around the world? What is your experience in that matter?
I always say I live in a bubble. You live in a bubble. I think we all live in our different bubbles. And my bubble is very influenced by LinkedIn, and the people I'm connected on LinkedIn. And it's not even very Western. It's specific to certain countries. So when I look at the information I get, it's mostly content from the Netherlands, the US, and the UK. Probably due to the languages, as it's easy to follow. And I see that information about neurodiversity there is increasing in the last 2 or 3 years. There is more understanding, more events you can follow, more podcasts like this, webinars, talks, and so on. But it's still only in a small community. Um, and my perception says that in the rest of Europe and rest of the Western world, it's not so much accepted, and it's still a lot of taboo. And I have a feeling that in other continents like Africa and Asia, it's even less known and less talked about. But that's like my question for you. What have you heard or noticed in Poland? Have you ever heard somebody even talking about it, or is it only you only hear when somebody mentions their children and it's not talked about how does it influence adults, for example?
Hmm. That's a very good question. And I recall that when I was younger, mostly some challenges were recognized when someone, although paying a lot of attention to how they write, they were still repeating the very same mistakes. I even I even studied with a colleague that he was great, and he was really making very little mistakes, but he helped me realize what is the cost for him to maintain his writing in such a good excuse me. Mhm. Super hot today in here. So to maintain his writing in a good shape. What I see currently is that we talk a lot, as you suggested, about children. So, what sometimes happens is that some sensitivity, sensory sensitivity, is diagnosed among the children, or there are some tests helping to understand parents what kind of potential challenges their children have. Sometimes it happens that when the children is diagnosed and some suggestions are given, the doctors, the specialists ask, hey, parents, what about you? Maybe we can also help you better understand yourself, and maybe you can also become a better parent thanks to it. However, when I think about my early school years, I remember that you are either doing good or doing bad. I don't care. I don't even care whether you slept properly, whether you ate properly. You have to be like, Gaussian curve.
Yeah.
You have to be here. You can be better, but if you are outside on this worse side, you are a bad student. Joanna, you are a bad student.
That still sounds much better than I would have expected. And it makes me think a few weeks ago I submitted a workshop for a conference, an Agile conference to talk about neurodiversity. And that was the first time I submitted a workshop out of the Netherlands because
Mm-hmm.
so far I have been giving workshops and talks either in Netherlands or in Belgium. And that was a country further away. And when I was talking with the selection committee, who are also agilists and scrum masters, they said that this is not the problem they currently have in the country, and in their technology teams they don't have neurodivergent people. Um, and my mind was just blown away because here, when I ask the audience how many neurodivergents do they know, everybody knows somebody. It could be your family member, friend, colleague. When you start talking, they recognize people who might have one or another condition without knowing it for sure. But that's because the information we have in the Netherlands is relatively high, although it can always be higher.
Hmm.
And then there are other countries in Europe where it's much less talked about and where it's right now not even something people would be interested in because they know so little. So I hope in like 10, 20 years, well, actually, I hope in 5, but okay, let's start with 10, the situation would change and they would get more perceptive. And I know that when I have searched for finding some information, for example, in Latvian about autism, the only information I could find was about children. Finding
Hmm.
something for adults in Latvian, at least online, mission impossible. It just doesn't exist. And then I'm talking only about adults. And there are quite some differences with autism in males and in females. That's another step where first you need to understand how it works for adults and then you can talk about gender differences. So there is a lot which a lot of big differences between the countries, but I also kind of understand it because it's a relatively new topic to talk about, which is less than 100 years old, and depending on the condition it might be even newer. So there's so much happening in the world, and we all choose our battles and priorities, what's important.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. And now I recall another stereotype from my good friend, and he's from the Agile community, you know. He is neurodivergent, and he told me once that, you know, Joanna, neurodivergent people are so talented. Maybe you are also neurodivergent.
It's like everybody is talented, right? Yeah. I mean, I it's a nice way how to look at it, but at the same time, it gives the feeling that neurotypicals cannot be talented, right? And that's not the case. I'm left-handed. You Yesterday when I went to a doctor and the doctor was also left-handed, she made a joke. Oh yeah, left-handed people are the creative ones. Okay, sure. Right-handed people are also creative. It's just not everybody. So that's one of the things some people can get very sensitive because it only talks about putting people in boxes. So that's why I always like to talk about the strengths and weaknesses and not saying that's only something neurodivergents can have. It's just they might be struggling with certain things more than everybody else.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. So let's keep stereotypes, and I hope that we will all learn that this is a really strange path. Not to mention the fact, like, you know, being a woman at a very technical university years ago and wearing glasses. So, you know, what kind of stereotypes I had to face. Well, I believe you can imagine. But let's talk about benefits. Okay, so you are the advocate for neurodiversity, and I strongly believe that you see benefits, potential, valuable outcomes that we can achieve not only in our working environment. So, what are those benefits that you see we can gain?
I'm gonna start with the one which might not be the one what you expect, but that's more on the social scale. By making sure that the workplaces are appropriate for neurodivergence, we help them to work. And statistics shows that most of neurodivergents in the world are not working, not because they can't, but because they cannot find an environment which works for them. And I don't remember the numbers, but it's really, really high amount of people who would want to work, who have the knowledge, but they just cannot get employed. So, and once they get employed, not everybody can hold a job. I have a very good friend who is autistic who would love to work, but for the last 2 years she has struggled finding a company which fits her needs because her expectations are rather high, and what she needs from a company is certain level of quality which not every company can provide, because we all know not every company is perfect, so to say. But by helping those people to stay in the workplace, it's better for our taxes because they go to somewhere else. Those people have a meaningful life. They can mean something to everybody else, and it's a win-win situation. How do we make those inclusive environments where they can work? That often depends on what they need. So it's always having a conversation and figuring out what are the needs for your colleagues. And they don't even need to be neurodivergent, because everybody has certain needs and preferences. And if you talk about it in your team as a scrum master and figure out what works for the team, then you will be already covering a lot. There are obviously some certain things like figuring out if the lights are not too light or too dark, if there is not too much noise in case if you work in an open place office, if you have flexible working hours so you can leave when you get overloaded, if you get good um, sick benefits, and you can just take a mental health day, for example, which is something a lot of people don't dare to do. So if you advocate for that, you will help everybody else as well. Um, Apart from that, you want people to really do their best at work. And if neurodivergents need to pretend they're like everybody else and do those things they're not so comfortable with, they will not be able to be their best because they're so busy thinking about, am I doing the right thing? An easy example would be Monday morning, you come to the office and there is this usual coffee talk about how was your weekend and what did you do, or on Friday evening before you leave, the same. Quite a lot of neurodivergents don't do well with small talk, and you can argue if weekend is a small talk or no. I call it a small talk. So if you accept that not everybody needs to be part of that conversation, and you don't make comments to somebody who is skipping it, that will be win-win for everybody. There are other topics you can ask them to engage with, like talking about their hobbies if they're willing to share, or going directly to the topic about some work-related question you have been wondering about. So accepting that people have differences and is already a very big step.
So we are once again emphasizing do not put people to one basket, and it applies to all of us.
And if you help minorities, you help majorities. That goes the same with if you help working moms, you help working dads, you help everybody. If you help disabled people, you help people who have physical difficulties, and so on and so on. It's just sometimes a bit sad that minorities are the ones who need to start advocating for themselves and who need to who need to carry all the burden more than others. But that's the reality we live in.
And what about the remote work model? Do you believe that this remote work created some opportunities for neurodivergent people to keep on doing the job or starting working because they can stay at home with their comfortable own space?
I have heard from quite a lot of people that it has helped, because you are in your environment. You often have more flexible hours. You don't have this overload of people constantly being around you. But I think it's also important to remember that remote work doesn't work for everybody. I worked for a remote company for 7 months. It was I had really lovely colleagues, but I one of the reasons I left the company is because I wanted to go to the office. Not because I like chit chatting and talking about my weekend, but because for me as a scrum master, it's easier to notice what's happening with my team when I'm physically with them. What I noticed as a remote Scrum Master, it cost me so much energy to figure out how the team is doing. I needed to write them loads of messages because Slack was not always, the team channels were not always up to date. I needed to put myself much more out there, and it was more one way communication. In the office, I not only felt that I can feel things because everybody is there, and if I look at their body language and the ways they interact, I can sense if something is happening. But also, it was easier for me to distinguish between my private and my work life. So I knew I'm leaving the office, my private life begins, and I don't need to open my computer until tomorrow. So, yes, there are a lot of people for whom remote work helps, but let's not assume that's everybody, and let's not assume that this is a solution to everything. It just gives us more possibilities, and it's nice that people nowadays can choose what kind of work do I want. Do I want to go to the office? Do I want to work remote? Do I want something hybrid? I think that's the most important outcome of the unfortunate pandemic.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So having choices on the plate seems like something that can help all of us so that we can choose the environment that works for us.
And one more thing about remote work, which is important. I have heard from a lot of managers who want to force video calls during remote work. So let's say you have a town hall, you have a team meeting, video obligatory on every team member, even when you're not talking. And I get where management comes from, but if you haven't heard about the term Zoom fatigue, I suggest you to Google it. It's again not something only for neurodivergence, but they struggle with it more than neurotypicals. It can be awkward looking at your own face in that small screen. It can be awkward looking at people in screen for several hours in general. And people who don't turn cameras on, you should trust that they don't have malicious reasonings because they felt in sleep or they're somewhere else. They might have very good reasons for not turning their cameras on. So, again, don't punish remote workers by asking some obligatory rules which you, as a manager or somebody else, prefer because it's your preference. Your preference doesn't mean it's the best thing for the team.
That's an interesting topic, I believe, and it might be also connected with the trust, right? So whether you trust that people are doing their best or not. Yeah.
Definitely, and we all know there are some countries which trust their employees much more than others. I have actually had cases where I asked some colleagues to switch the camera off because it can be distracting, more than helpful. If um, there are some people who fidget during meetings, not because they cannot focus, but because fidgeting helps your brain to work more. And with fidgeting, I mean you could be making drawings, you could be playing with your phone, playing with your hair, something else. And it can be distracting if you're not used to it, especially when it's on a camera and if most of the people are in the office and only some people on the camera. So, actually, by switching off video and just focusing on audio, it can help. Not for everybody, it hardly helps for me because I need the video, but I know there are people for whom it's better. So, again, talk with the team and figure out what works for them.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those that examples and that story. So my last question is, what can we do to better address the topic of neurodiversity in our professional lives? So, in other words, I'm looking for some piece of advice from you.
It's very hard to choose only one, but I'm gonna try to remain very general, unfortunately. If you, as a Scrum Master, Agilist, team member, just start educating yourself about it, that will be already a great step forward. What do I mean by educating? If it's your thing reading books, if it's your thing watching YouTube videos, if it's your thing reading on LinkedIn, going to events, you choose what works for you in terms of learning and observe as much knowledge as you can. Because once you know enough, you will better understand it, start to disseminate the information to your team members, break the stigmas, correct people when they say something wrong, and serve by example. It's very general, I know, but I think that's the best starting point to just understand what it is, how it works, and what's relevant for your team and your colleagues, and only then going in specifics on specific topics.
Do you recall? I said that we have a last question, but I have one remaining in my head. Do you recall the moment when your awareness of neurodiversity helped you a lot as a Scrum Master, and you felt that it was important? It was super important in that moment.
I have had a lot of such moments. Um, I think one of them recently was we were changing some team members, and with some people leaving and some people joining, we also thought maybe we should change the way how we sit in the office because it didn't make sense anymore. So I was going around asking everybody preferences, where they would like to sit, and trying to make a plan which makes sense for everybody. And um, there was a certain colleague who only had two places they would like to sit out of 10 possible. And obviously, if you are not very aware, you can say that person is being very stubborn and they're not wanting to cooperate and they only want the best places. But knowing the history and knowing that that person is neurodivergent, for me, the next question was tell me about those two places. What's specific about those desks? Why exactly those two and not eight others? The reason was very simple. Those were next to a wall, and that person doesn't like somebody passing by them and everybody being able to look while they're working because that can be very stressful for some. I was not able to give them one of those two places, but I had another third place, which at that point didn't have a wall but had a transparent glass wall. So I said, what if we cover the glass with a paper so nobody can look in? Would that work for you? And they said, yeah, I don't care. As long as nobody can stand behind me and look at my screen, that would work. And I was kind of proud for asking those questions and digging first instead of saying no, you will not get what you want because we all need to make sacrifices, or giving them one of the two other places which would influence other team members. Does that answer to your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Thank you so much. I love that story. I love that story, and I love that you understood the the issue. You understand the need, and you were able to find a solution instead of okay, that's life. We have to do it right there.
And I often say all those solutions that don't even have so much to do with neurodiversity. It's just about being a human being, trusting your colleagues, and asking the right questions. And that's what we as Scrum Masters are there for. We should be the ones asking good questions and asking five wives to figure out the root cause, no matter what the situation.
And I believe with that statement we can conclude our conversation. That was a powerful one. So what about the hashtag for our today's meeting? So each conversation has a hashtag. Do you have any idea, Anita? What could it be this
Apart
time?
from neurodiversity, do you need a different hashtag?
Neurodiversity works for me. So everyone, thank you very much for being with us, and you know what kind of hashtag you should put into the comments. Thank
Thanks
you
for
for
listening.
thank you very much, and thank you, Anita. Hope to see you in the near future.
Bye.